somebody like me credibly be accused of being, as I was in the Canadian media this week, in something called the Jewish Tribune, I think. I was called a Jew hater. This is a poisonous libel. And I give notice to these people now. We are going to start suing them for libel and defamation for these kinds of lies. Now, I've touched on Afghanistan. I can't do better than say that this war in Afghanistan has been doomed from the beginning. The Afghans are quite good at fighting, you know. I once was in a meeting where an Afghan stood up and said, "We're a peace-loving people." And everybody laughed, like you just laughed. The Afghans have never allowed any foreign army to occupy their country, and they never will. Even Alexander the Great didn't successfully occupy Afghanistan, and Mr. Harper, you ain't no Alexander the Great. This war has been doomed from the beginning. I said, if you'll allow me to quote myself, in the debate in the British Parliament 4 days after the terrorist atrocity of 9/11, in which thousands of people, innocent people, were mercilessly massacred. I said, I despise Osama bin Laden, an obscurantist, medieval savage. But pointing at the Tory front bench, I said this: the difference between me and you is that I have always despised Osama bin Laden. I despised him when you were giving him guns and money and sending him to Afghanistan in the first place. Can you imagine anything more obscene than killing Afghans in 2010 to punish them for the presence in their country of people that we sent into their country 30 years ago? Can there be anything more obscene than the fact that the Afghans are being punished twice? First by us in sending these people there, and then again by us for having these people there. Not that there are many of them left, by the way. According to Bob Woodward, who has his sources deep in the American secret state, in his new book, Obama's Wars, is strangely precise. He says in the book that the American state believes there are now 45, not 44, not 46, 45 Al-Qaeda fighters left in Afghanistan. Well, if there's no Al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan, why are we in Afghanistan in our hundreds of thousands and reinforcing them, as you have just, or your government has just, announced that it's going to do? But you're only going to be training them. Does nobody in Canada ever ask, how come these Afghan Johnnies need quite so much training? You've been training them for 10 years with no noticeable improvement in their performance that I can see. General McChrystal announced that 35% of all those trained disappear out the back door and join the Taliban. Apparently the wages are better in the Taliban. Well, you can understand, after Karzai and his brother and the warlords and all the others have had their filled their pockets, there's not much left to pay the armed forces. But you are spending, I'm not making this figure up, nor am I exaggerating it, We are spending $1 billion a month training the Afghan army. Training them. Nobody's training the Taliban, but they're actually doing rather well on the battlefield. We're spending $1 billion a month, and what are we getting for it? And you, of course, have now committed yourselves to continuing it despite the promise, solemn, I thought binding, promise. How foolish was I? I was just giving the Canadian government some credit a month or so ago that at least they had decided to withdraw from the occupation of Afghanistan, but that was another broken promise. This war is doomed. It will never succeed. I said in the speech I quoted earlier that if we handle this the wrong way, we'll make 10,000 new Bin Ladens. Does anyone doubt that that's what we've done? By deepening the swamp of hatred and bitterness against us in Afghanistan and throughout the Muslim world, we've made probably not 10,000, maybe 100,000, maybe 1 million, maybe 10 million new Bin Ladens. Because that's where these monstrosities are emerging from. They didn't come out of a clear blue sky. They came out of a swamp of hatred, watered by our double standards and our injustice towards the Muslim world, occupying Muslim countries, propping up the corrupt kings and the puppet presidents who rule the Muslim world almost without exception from one end to the other, all the while protesting that we're in favor of democracy and liberty. Somebody asked me on the television yesterday, what about the flawed election in Iran? Flawed it may have been, but at least there is an election in Iran. Who elected the kings and the emirs in the Arabian countries on the Gulf, who sell themselves in a pact with the devil? The devil keeps them in power, allows them to fill their pockets as long as they kick back most of it to the people who are keeping them in power. You talk about the punishment of prisoners and the treatment of women and human rights in Iran, whilst arming to the teeth Saudi Arabia, where there is no liberty or rights or elections or any kind of freedoms, and never has been. Our best friends in the region